Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a special council meeting Monday, August the 19th, 2019. Moving in our agenda to item 1 is called to order. Item number 2 is purpose of the meeting, which is pretty obvious, and new business. And new business item number 1, I'll ask Clay to lead us in that particular.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thanks for your extra time this evening. Council is well aware we shared the recommended budget document at the end of August, so you've had it for a few weeks here, at the beginning of August, I'm sorry. And we're here tonight to follow up primarily on our Saturday work session. We did a lot of presentations and solicited at least 2 points, asked for any council questions or clarifications. And we wrote those down and shared those out to you last Monday. And then on Thursday, as part of the agenda that you have before you tonight, we have the answers or clarifications and extra information on all of those questions. So Mr. McCarter has a PowerPoint to help guide us and keep us on track and move things along. Make sure we get all the time you need for your deliberations, and ask Mr. McCarter to recap the agenda and then the first group of discussion follow-up items.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is John McCarter, Assistant Finance Director. So as Mr. Pearson hit on in his intro, we got a pretty concise agenda tonight. First, we'll open the discussion up. I believe there were 13 items we followed up on from last meeting. We do have 2 record votes tonight that we need to get done. The first is the public hearing and the readings for the budget. We are required to have 1 public hearing for our budget document and 2 readings to adopt the ordinance for the budget itself. The second vote is on the tax rate. We are required to have 2 hearings for the tax rate if we decide to go above the effective tax rate. That's the way it's written up here. That's what was proposed and the consensus of council to move forward with that. And then we are also required to have 2 readings coming up at the end of September to adopt that tax rate. So diving into number 1, we have the first 8 items here referenced in the packet that was distributed last Thursday. We'll open it up for any questions or comments that council has on any of these.
Again, Mayor and Council, these were primarily additional information items. Wasn't necessarily any actions on these, but probably best, rather than trying to go through each one of these, if there's any questions on any of these first 8, we'd love to hear any feedback and make sure that these hit the mark with what you needed.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mayor,
does the council have any questions on that item?
These first 8.
Let's start a discussion with Woody. Why don't you crank this up, and then we'll run it down through the council.
Okay, I guess. The one on that second one on the PCI ratings across the city, are those just the asphalt ratings in some of the jurisdiction areas? It look like it's on the 4 or 5 small asphalt roads, less than a mile or something like that?
We did an update on the asphalt, but I think the ratings are applicable, same system for all of it. I don't know if Trent want to.
Well, the overall ratings include both concrete and asphalt. If you're referring to the specific streets that are listed, then those are, I believe, all asphalt streets that are planned for our program for 20.
Yeah, those were all very short streets through there, but to me, I don't think they carry much traffic at all, in there. So I don't know if that's a good identification on project for the PCI on the ratings across the city as to, or those 4 areas in there. And I guess on that number 3 on Independence Park, that was a fund balance or balance that's in the park fund and can't be used.
Yes, sir.
So there's nothing we can do other than use it on that bridge for that park?
Our recommendation is the best use of those park development funds. We narrowed down the zones. It's probably more of a regional one, but that bridge, there has been interest in reestablishing that connection. DD4 is no longer in the pedestrian bridge business there, so if we want to get it done, and that was our recommendation, to use those park development funds for that.
And I guess one of the other things was the drop in, at number 6, drop in the debt obligation in future years. On being able to drop that, and then we're adding more in CO's general fund, our obligations on a yearly basis into those areas, and I don't see how we can, are we going to be paying off debt during that time, or what, in order to come up to that?
Right. So obviously, we've got a debt schedule that we are paying off our existing debt, and these get wrapped around that. And the best illustration for that is on page 5 of 43, where we lay those out for the next 5 years. The existing debt's stable because of how it's been structured. The new general future GO, that was what was described to voters and is included. So we're off and running with all of that. And we had programmed or projected a 4-cent increase with the 2019 bonds. We're below that this year on the debt side. So, but the rest of that's all been programmed out, and the COs are a piece of that for the things like the new a fire station replacement at 4. I can't remember what else we have in future COs, a couple very limited items. And then the TERS, which we've gone over, which if we want to have $50 million worth of public improvement projects paid by TERS, which we couldn't get done otherwise, that's that green item. So as the most important thing is as a percentage of our ability to pay in the tax base, it's declining. So we're well within our targets for debt service, being able to service this general obligation debt. So it's very manageable. It's all programmed in, and we know what is coming out in the future with this.
It just seemed like to me that what we're looking at is actually coming in with a tremendous amount of debt, but some of it's on on the water wastewater side through there. But it just seems like that with that and the bond issues that our bond sales that we're going through on the $80 million worth of bonds to be sold on there, that it just seems like a tremendous amount of debt coming through, and it just seems like it's just not balanced of paying debt off in order to drop the debt obligation over a period of time.
I guess a lot is subjective in the eye of the beholder, but it's a big operation in a big city and growing, and again, thankfully growing. So these are all capital programs that you've seen in the CIP, and these are all, again, there aren't any surprises in here. The mud rebates is a big chunk of that. That's the exception we've obligated ourselves to. We fixed that for future ones. So that's 8 cents maybe. It's not debt, quote unquote, but the rest of it and the TERS stuff will fall off when we get reimbursed from that in 7 years, 6, 7 years. So we'll get that money back with interest. So it's a very manageable from the city's ability to pay standpoint.
And it just kind of looks like, going through this, and if we go with the tax rate as, 74, that looks like for this next year, after that for 21, we'll be looking at another tax increase. Because going through the information that we got, we see a slowdown now, and then the sales tax is not what it would be, what we had hoped it to be. But in addition to that, then, your appraisals are coming in through there, and we see that we really don't have the big projects going on out there as far as residential anymore like we've had in the past. So it just seems like, even in the information we have here, the future's not as bright as it has been in the past. And I just think we need to be a little bit more cautious as we go through here and actually looking at the debt that we're coming in with and how we're going to pay it off in the future years without having to raise the tax every year.
Council, have any other, the rest of the council have any questions that come up out of this before we move to item 2?
Yes, Mayor. Just kind of going through a few of these. So on the traffic fund, the schedule and designation of projects, essentially where all the pro rata funds are. I really appreciate y'all going through and deep researching this and seeing a little bit more transparency where that $600,000+ was. Particularly seeing that how some of it is being used in the near future for the traffic signal at Forest Park. I think it would be helpful maybe in future budgets if we keep that update coming, so we can see it's not just the $600,000 that can be freely used on. It's assigned. It's a pro rata share that's got to be used for something in particular. And then, as we see some of these projects coming up, we can identify there's at least a little bit of funds that can be used for it. The PCI ratings, again, I know that another member wanted to see that. None of this surprises me. We've got old, deteriorating roads. I think it hopefully that highlights future needs and future budgets to be able to focus more on roadway improvements, particularly as our east side infrastructure ages. Jumping down a bit, the next one, the Independence Park Bridge funding. I did talk to the member of the BDD4 commission, and they said that they may not necessarily object to contributing to the bridge. They were not aware that we were moving forward with it. I'm okay with allocating the funds for it right now, but before we move forward with the project, I would like us to try and reach out to them, try and see if there's some kind of match, a fund share that they can match. It seemed as if at least one of the three members, which is a pretty significant amount with respect to approval, would be willing to at least contribute. So if we can offset the funds or share a little bit of the funds on that, I think that would be the best way to move forward. The hot tax debt issuance can just for the public or the benefit of the public, can we go through what was detailed in the write-up a little bit about how we can use those funds and how we can take debt from those funds?
John or John, you want to try to take that, or?
So I'll take a crack at it, and I'll let Darren join in where he feels appropriate when he comes back into the room. So we can issue debt utilizing the hotel motel tax fund. However, if we're going to do that, it has to be on a specific project related to a convention and visitors facility, a convention center, and it has to be a specific project that's identified, and we can use that money to help pay debt on that project.
Okay, so that generally answers, or at least addresses what I was hoping to have heard. Is we can utilize that money for a future project. We can't take debt off of it, since it seems to be at this point just accumulating, and we don't really have, at least that I've not seen that we have a particular project or event that's targeted for that. Maybe that's in future years the direction we would go. Allow it to accumulate, but maybe put it down on a project that we want or need.
And I would add to that I think what we'd like to do is put together a white paper that we can bring back to you and maybe talk about some of the projects that were initially identified and some studies that we've done through PEDC, and also talk about other projects that we might want to consider for that in the future. But I think that all relates to direction and maybe a thought-out plan that we want moving forward for CVB hot tax funds.
I think that'd be a good idea. At least it's worthy of discussion amongst us, whether we want to allow the money to accumulate and try and buy something big, or each year try and move towards more events, more concerts, expanding some of our current events, to kind of identify what we want to do with the money. If we're collecting it, I think we need to use it. It's only fair to to those individuals that we're collecting it from, the hotels, that we have some sort of identified purpose for it. Yes, sir.
I was going to suggest that each council member would be number 2, pick up number 2, number 3, and then the council fall in behind with that.
We can.
Well, you go ahead.
Yeah, I think, okay, we'll just, however the other council members want to do. And the other items, particularly with relation to the water rate and the base fee, which is not one of the 8, are we going to do that next? Okay, just being sure. That's all I have for on these first 8 items, Mayor.
Okay, it was sort of across the board there, but Gary, why don't you pick up on number 3, lead it off, and we'll back you up with additional comments.
Good, because that was the only question I had. So the park bridge funding, are we able to use that funding for anything else in the park, or is it just for, are we just slated to use it for the bridge?
Chris might be able to help us out there.
Yes, sir. The funding that's allocated there has to have, the law uses the word a nexus of rough proportionality. So what we do in the addition has to have a direct nexus to a population growth. So we couldn't just install something new as an add-on to the park. It would have to be something that maybe was retired because of overuse. So the bridge is actually an ideal candidate of funding. It's got some pretty stringent standards around it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Council, any questions? Is that all he had on that? Any other question from council on item 3?
Yeah, I did have, so if the scenario were that we were able to get some type of a cost share scenario with the drainage district, I did a question about the kind of interim parking lot area that's there right now. Is there any plan to do anything with that, or is that just kind of a temporary deal? And can money be put towards that if that's the case, if it's not already kind of in the works?
Yes, sir, it could be. And the eventual plan is just to continue for a very brief period longer, monitoring the attendance to ensure we keep using that lot, and then work intra-city to utilize some of our resources and make that a blacktop area to expand upon that.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, I think the reality of getting funding from the drainage district for that bridge is unlikely. What we might be able to get is some in-kind work for helping for the foundation itself, but in all likely it wouldn't be in the form of money.
Okay. Does the rest of the council have any questions on item 3? Number 4.
Thank you, Mayor. So item number 4 for everyone that's here is talking about the doomsday scenario, if we were to keep it at the effective tax rate. This was actually a question that I asked of staff in our last meeting. That would be if we kept it at the effective tax rate, it would result in a loss of approximately $2.6 million in revenue, resulting in a $2.2 million gap from the recommended budget. And so I asked for some end-of-day scenarios for that and just kind of, how it would affect things. And I got my answers, so it's quite a bit here. Removal of all non-public safety supplemental requests except for the Independence Park demolition. Talking about we talked already about streets and sidewalks and kind of where we are with funding there, as well as cost of living adjustment for staff, slashing remaining funding for any supplemental requests for police, postponing the opening fire station number 8, staff, yes, for number 8, and so forth. So it's a pretty dramatic scenario. However, I guess a point to make for anyone who might be interested, the annual change from the rate difference on the city portion of the tax bill would be approximately $57 a year, or $4.75 a month between the proposed rate and the effective tax rate. And I don't have anything to add or ask for that. I appreciate staff taking the time to draw this up.
Does the council have any question in addition to that? Any other council comments?
If there aren't, sir, we can move.
Comments on that?
Yep, we got another slide of additional page. I'll flip that, John.
Item 4.
Just the next group there. So, Mayor, these were the last follow-ups that were presented to us on Saturday, and these 9 through 13. So I guess the meter change base rate rationale, we went through that. It's very complicated, frankly. In the time that was allotted, we did our best to try to explain that. But 2 years ago, the city went to a volumetric sort of rate basis, which is equitable and based upon meter size. There was an AWWA, American Water Works Association, factor rate for how much water gets put through a meter size. And at that time, we tweaked it a little bit. And we've been working with that for the last 2 years. I think the users on the system are used to that. And now, there was a question just to see what that would look if we went back to the original, I think. And so we tried to do our best to show you the estimates on that, and that's shown in the materials we gave you there. So if there's further interest in pursuing that, we can keep going down that road, but that's sort of where we're at with number 9 especially.
That's number, anybody got a question about number 9?
Yes, Mayor. One, I appreciate staff looking into this. I do think that revisiting this, the base rate, putting essentially, for lack of a better term, more of the share on the commercial end and trying to control the rate for the residential users may be the best approach if we want to attack the rate. I think there's I think we do need to make sure that any residential 3/4 and 1-inch meters that we've identified already, we use a 1 multiplier for them and keep the additional the multipliers only for the commercial uses. But I would encourage us to try and adopt the rates that y'all originally proposed. I think going on 2 years ago, and try and control the rate of the bill increases. I think what y'all had proposed in here was about a little over capping or adjusting from a little over 5% to a little over 1.5% increase for this year or the next. So I think that's at least for me a direction that I would like to head in order for us to be able to ensure that we're still getting the revenue that we need in order to operate our system, but controlling the rates and the growth of the rates for our residential users, particularly our low-income residential users.
I would like to add to that. I feel very similarly. We do get a lot of people reaching out specifically about water rates, and so if we can take it from that 5% to 1.6. I can't speak on behalf of all business owners, but I know that I would, if I was in the scenario, I would be okay taking on that additional cost. It's really, in the grand scheme of things, not that huge of an impact, I guess, on things for the base rate specifically. But if we have any other business owners out there in the community that want to come and voice their opinion, love to hear from them. But as far as the residential side goes, I think this would be a great thing to help control those costs for our residents.
Maybe it's beneficial in the conversation. Trent, I don't know if you remember off the top of your head, since the largest annual increase is on the 8 and 10-inch meters, do you remember roughly about how many of those 8-inch meters and how many of those 10-inch meters we have across town?
It was in the slide on Saturday. We had those big pie charts. That's what Trent's trying to find.
It didn't have to be exact number. I think it was like 2 10-inch meters and then maybe like under 20 8-inch meters.
I found it, Trent, yeah. So percentage-wise, 92% of the accounts are 5/8 and 3/4, and 0% are 3 to 10. So it's just a negligible amount. I don't see the and the 10s. I think there's like 1 or 2 of them. They must have some big fire flow or something like that.
I think there are a couple of apartment complexes. Yeah, I think it was 2, and I think the hospitals had the 8 inches. It's every hospital I've done has been 8 inches.
Clay, I believe Mr. Upton has the actual numbers.
Councilman Perez, with regards to that, on our full meter changeout program, there's currently 6 8-inch meters, 4 10-inch meters, and 1 12-inch meter in the system right now.
Okay. So in this chart, we would update it to include that 1 12-inch. But we're not, on the high end of who's going to, where these, who's going to pay the most if we make this adjustment. There's just a handful of businesses in town. This is not going to affect a drastic amount. Most of the businesses will have a nominal increase. I own a small business. I wouldn't mind contributing a little bit more if it means that the residents can pay a little less. So if the other council members are encouraged to move forward with adopting this as the path forward as opposed to the increase in the rate, I think that's the way we should go, personally.
I just have a quick question there. Given the extreme skew and just we have so few of those larger meter sizes, do we have any modeling around how much that would actually defray the water bill for the 5/8 and 3/4?
I'm trying to find that in the packet. Do you know where that went to, Trent? That had the sample bills and the changes?
Is that what you're referring to? Is the specific, what it would specifically do on the, on their meter?
Yeah, just
or
pretty
on
much-
their- On their bills, or?
Yeah, if you were to just go to these, if you were to go to the old proposed rates, how much money does that free up even to reduce on the single-family home side?
So I think the best way to put that is it generates, I think it's in the memo, and enough additional revenue from those that we can limit the overall rate increase to 1.6%. And
For this year?
there was a one. Yeah, it was about an additional 1.6 is the additional revenue we need to gain to keep that rate increase at 1.6. And so that offset the bulk of that. We'd still have the 1.6 across the board increase.
And then that's for this year and then future years?
Yes. So the only thing I'd caution against is Councilmember Perez talked about possibly holding all the residential meters that are 1 inch and or anything larger than 5/8 that are residential, holding those at the base rate, that 5/8. Is that correct? We've got about the concern is we have about 900 of those, so those are going to make a fair amount of that additional revenue.
We have 900 3/4 and 1 inch residential users.
Yes, sir.
Are they high demand users? Are they homes that are significantly sized where they have that kind of demand?
I don't know specifically. We haven't done the math on every one of them. I know that when we changed out the billing mechanism, when we changed to the meter-based rates, we had several of them come in at that point and asked to be reduce their meter size, and we had to go through a calculation process. And if they were able to, based on the size of home and what they had connected to it, if we were able to reduce them, we did so.
Okay, so we think once the rates or once the meters are switched out, we believe that we'll have every meter, every residential meter appropriately sized. So if it's a 3/4 inch, they should be a 3/4 inch. If the builder for some reason put in a 1 inch, or I'm sorry, it's a 5/8, it needs to be a 5/8. If we had an incident where a builder put in a 1 inch, even though it's 2,300 square foot home, we will have switched that out to a 5/8, and that will adjust, or that will amend this issue associated with trying to adjust the 3/4 and 1 inch.
So just to clarify, we've got 5/8 inch meters, or 5/8 inch meters at residential properties, and we have 1 inch meters. The 3/4, we don't actually have any of those in the system. And with the meter change out, we are going to go back and look at those and see how to handle those to get those down to 5/8 inch meter if based on what they have connected to it, it works.
Okay. What would you need from us at this point to be able to move forward with something other than just increasing the rate to the 5%?
I think if there's a consensus, I would suggest that you so direct that or suggest that with as many nodding heads as possible. And we'll come back, and what you get presented then will reflect that in terms of the actual new rate ordinance that you'll have. So that'd be the next step. You'll see that in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever that is.
So last time when we talked about doing this, I don't think anybody was really in favor of hitting the businesses. Why can't we spread this out all, excuse me, all across the board? I mean, fair is fair. Why are we going to the business and ask them to pay a bigger percentage of this?
I guess from my perspective, it's just trying to address the concern we hear from the citizens, particularly low-income citizens, that the water rates are going up and it's becoming more and more difficult for the low-income members of our community to be able to afford their water bill. So it was just trying to revisit a conversation we had earlier about a mechanism to reduce the growth of the rates but still generate the revenue. Again, if I'm alone, I'll leave it be as just trying to address the concern that we've heard over the last year, and considering that the next few years the rates are going to go up even more if we continue with the same model. I think it's at least something that merits the discussion.
I mean, how much would we have to raise base rates across the board for everybody? What would that do? I mean, it'd be a nominal amount, right?
That didn't really work that way. I mean, as you can see, there's no across the board you can really do because the larger meters use more water relative, and so there's a base and all these. Like I started to say,
I understand that, but I'm just saying if we're gonna charge businesses more, why not charge the resident base fee higher? Because if you spread it out, I mean, it's going to be less of an impact to anybody than us hitting all the businesses with a 5% or something increase.
So I mean, I think we have enough things in this city that we've already kind of put the residents in a place where we have high taxes or supposedly high taxes. We have a lot of costs, specifically with MUDs and just the different things that residents already, not just the lower class residents, or not lower class, but from a lower economic standpoint, have to bear the brunt of, but also the middle class as well. And so I think that's where Councilman Perez was coming from, by saying, hey, look, let's not necessarily put all the costs on the businesses, but a business obviously generates way more money than a household on average, right? And that's typically known. We have business owners up here, including myself, and so some of us would see that cost, whether or not I own the building or it's being kind of conveyed in my rent. At the end of the day, I do think that a business should probably eat more of that cost than a resident. I think it was stated last time, I don't know if it was Councilmember Little that said, hey, look, we're going to end up in a situation where people are going to move out of the city for one reason or the other, because we got too high of a tax rate, or too high of a water bill. And so I understand businesses are not necessarily going to be happy about an increase in water bills, or they're going to be unhappy about the fact that they're probably paying more in water than any other utility. But at the end of the day, I mean, spreading it across and making residents see a threefold increase in their water bill is ridiculous.
But this is the same body that sat up here and talked about doing a water fee.
Stormwater fee, yes.
Yeah, so we're talking about doing a stormwater fee, but it's not okay to spread out this to where everybody is paying a minimal increase. We're going to hit the business for a increase on their meter rate, and then we're going to charge everybody else a fee, a wastewater fee, which I don't like fees because they don't have as many checks and balances.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping on top of what you're saying, Member Reed, but from my perspective, I see it as we need the revenue. I mean, unless we're seeing programs or maintenance or things within the enterprise fund that we want to cut, we see an increasing need to be able to continue to maintain these lines, and we've seen what happens when we aren't able to pig the lines or do the regular maintenance, and we get the turbid water coming out of the faucet, and hearing people tell us about the smell and the look and the appearance of the water. And I think we know we need to continue to be aggressive about the maintenance and the expansion of the water line to be able to maintain pressures. It's just an issue of do we want to continue to do it with the rate, which I feel like you're arguing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the argument. It's just if we want to address the concern that we've heard from a lot of the people who vote us in the office to say they want us to try and control the rate in some way, this is a way that we have available. Trying to do stuff with more impact fees, we've already capped out there, and that's That's not a predictable revenue source from year to year because we don't know how much development's coming in. And they're really supposed to pay for what they're about to do this system, not what needs to still be done. So again, if I'm on an island or if there's not enough votes, I'm happy to concede that we'll have to just do it through the rate. But I think this is a creative way or an alternative way for us to generate the revenue that we need without having to continue to go through the rate to all of the residents.
Yeah, and I would just add also, on top of all of that, going back to looking at it from a business perspective, I think it's easier for the businesses to offset the cost. I think the other part of it is, there are so many businesses that are going to be able to also get part of this paid for by their customers that are not Pearland residents as well. I mean, that's the other aspect of business that I think, at least in my brain, I'm running through the scenarios. I mean, that gets passed on. A lot of our sales tax dollars even come from non-Pearland residents, so I see no reason why a base rate increase wouldn't be able to be kind of stretched out and supported by non-Pearland residents as well, which would give our actual residents a little bit of breathing room on their water bills, which again is what they've been asking for. And I mean, we're here to answer to them. So,
well, what you're looking at going back on this, and I think the business can actually add to it, but what you're looking at now is a rate increase of 5% in your water and sewer for this year, coming up in 20, and the next year 9%, and the year after that 9%. So you're looking at a 24% increase in your water and wastewater through there over the next 3 years, or 3 budget processes to go through. And then if you're looking at a tax rate being, if it goes in tonight at the 74, coming up in 21, you're looking at a 0.7885 and then a 0.7842. So you're looking at a tax increase for 3 years. You're looking at a water increase of 24% at the end of 3 years to do that. And I think there is a lot of concern out there right now in the general public. I mean, in there of the cost of what it is. I mean, if you get a water bill, for $100 a month now, in 3 years it'd be $125 a month, and or it could be more. I don't see it going down from that, but there is a lot of concern from the residential out there through there, and I don't know if anybody else on the other side got anything on text, but replacing the water meters. I guess maybe y'all got some calls on it or whatever, that the water meters are plastic going in, connecting to a metal, and they're stripping the threads out on it, causing water leak as it goes through.
Remember, that's not on the agenda, but that's not true.
No, but
I
was just wondering if anybody else got those.
We only got a third hand, but we've had 0 complaints about leaks in Wood Creek, so.
Yeah.
We've had 19 of about.
But anyway, going back
to
the same deal of looking at that, I think it's time that we take a look and see where we're at, and over the next 2 or 3 years, are we going to be able to handle this? Are we going to be able to get us, the tax rate where we can pay for it without raising taxes on the citizens? I mean, it's just unbelievable amount that we're going through and the amount of debt financing that we're going through right now. So.
I don't know what the answer is as far as how we're going to allocate this between businesses and the residences. As we were discussing it tonight, I'm getting a text from a business owner saying his water bill is already higher than his electric bill, and that's without this increase. So, and I agree with Woody. This is just the first year. We've got this happening for over the next 3 years, along with the property tax increase. And I brought this up at the first budget discussion. This is just the tip of the iceberg, I think, on what we're going to start hearing from the citizens of Pearland. We're already hearing it. And it's not going to be a fun next 3 years up here. We've got to explain this. So,
and I know residents where their water bill is almost as much as their electric bill. So I mean, it's
my
going
water
to get
bill
more
last
difficult.
month was over $300. So.
Yeah. I know people that have, $600 water bills, so.
I have 7 people live in my house, and my water bill's like $85. And I have a pool and a sprinkler system. Well, once a week's good.
Mayor and Council, I get the hyperbole and the politics, and I appreciate all that, but there's not going to be, the average bills we showed on Saturday, and we were talking about with the increase, $5 a month for the residential. So, and I know it's all cumulative, and this is your call, but, and I'll just point to that page 7 of 43, and that's just the base. That's not any of the users. Just so we're all aware, the 4 and the 6 inch, commercial examples would be an annual increase there of $4,000 or $8,000. So, that's just the calculation we got to make to try to offset, that residential, which is the vast bulk of the customer base. So, if we get some consensus direction to move forward, we'll design it up. We were ready to go 2 years ago with the multipliers, as we said, and if we're going to go back to that, we happily tee up the ordinance for that.
I guess maybe trying to understand what Member Little and Member Owers are saying. Y'all are concerned about the rate going up. I think that there's 2 ways we can approach the rate. We can cut the service, or we can look for an increase in the base rate. Since there's, at least I'm not seeing any other way to generate the revenue that we need. So if we want to control the rate, I think it has to come from the base rate. I don't see that increasing the base rate on residents is really in addressing the overall rate increase, because we're just moving it from a rate increase over to the base, and then they'll end up paying basically the same increase. So if we want to control the rate, I think this is the best way, the most expedient way, and most readily available way for us to control the rate over the next few years.
And I'm looking forward in the original budget presentation, but I'm sorry, can staff remind me again the number of 6 inch and 8 inch meters that we have?
It's like Robert had that, so.
Councilman Orlando, with regards to that, the number is 6 8-inch meters, 4 10-inch meters, and 1 12-inch meter.
I'm sorry, would you say for 6?
For 6 inch would be 33.
33, yeah. Yeah, so I'm just looking at this, and like we said earlier, this would result in a roughly $5 a month increase for homeowners, so $60 a year, and just seeing this for the 6 through 10, seeing that for 33 customers, that's going to be a $6,000 unexpected bump to their bill. I would just kind of want a little more analysis around that before I did that so flippantly.
Just so I'll remember, we had 0 increases last year, so it's not been exponential, and the projections beyond that are, dependent upon the weather and our best guesses other than that. So, but don't forget we had zeros last year too.
It's a lot that goes into the whole rate. I mean, it's just not looking to the rate of water and what it's charged. But again, it's a water sale, but it looks at the whole department and overhead cost and everything else that goes into that rate. So it's just not the price of the water that's going in there. It's for the whole department on the enterprise system as a part of that, and selling the bonds on that. So, I mean, we've got some heavy times coming in, finishing the surface water plant and selling a lot of bonds through there that's going to impact that rate. So it's just not the sale of water. And like Clay said, you can have a very dry year and sell a lot of water, or you can have a very wet year and you don't sell as much into there. So it's a whole departmental type review on a whole enterprise system, and just not the sale of water. I think, at this point in time, I think it's incumbent upon us sitting up here to go in and take a look at the whole budget process as it is right now, and see where we're at, and see what the future is bringing to us, and see how we can do different things that maybe settle some of the amount of dollars that we have to spend for different things.
So Councilman Owens, are you saying like to pass most of the cost on to the businesses as well?
think it's a share, but I think more would be probably on the business side. Like you say, they got an opportunity to generate revenue.
Yeah.
Where the people that are living in homes don't have that opportunity for generation of those, and maybe it's not that much. If we're able to get more businesses in to generate more revenue for them, sell more tea or whatever,
Well,
people coming in and
If I sell more tea, I use more water.
okay. Well, that's true.
And I agree with what Councilman Hernandez said when he said most of that you can actually pass off. As a business owner, I could raise my rates, right? I wouldn't do that, but I could raise my rates, or Councilman Hernandez can raise the cost of tea. It just kind of depends on what your business is, right? And so it's a lot easier from a revenue standpoint, bringing in revenue standpoint to pass that cost on as opposed to just a resident. And so, I'm in agreement with that. I think we have to figure out how much. I'm not saying the resident shouldn't bear any of the burden of the rates going up at all. We do have residents that waste water, right? We have residents that may just leave their faucets on. I don't know what goes on in everyone's home, but at the end of the day, someone like that, but that's getting a pass, and the businesses are bearing, all of the burden. It doesn't make sense. And so I think we should figure out some type of formula with our approach, to instead of just saying, hey, look, the businesses are going to take on all of the increase.
I think we have at least 3 members that are okay following the model that was presented that shifts some of the base rate over, more of the base rate over into the commercial end. At least one member I've heard is definitively against that. And to say, I don't think there's a right and wrong answer. It's just really do we want, if we want to address the comment that we've heard repeatedly over the last few years of controlling the rate, do we want to follow this plan in order to control the rate, or do we want to accept what staff has proposed, which is a 5% increase this year and subsequent increases in the next few years, and just be willing to explain to the citizens that is what we need to do. So I think maybe for the better benefit of staff, if there's another member that wants to explore or proceed with moving forward with shifting the base rate over more on the commercial side, then that at least gives staff the direction. If not, then they can move forward with the model that they originally proposed and kind of put this matter to bed.
Well, that's what I just said, right?
And just to be really clear on this to make sure I understand. So we're talking about for some of these larger meters, we would quadruple their base rates. And that would result in just this year, instead of having a 5% bump overall, we'd have a 1.6%. Is that right? And then in future years, we would anticipate the same. I believe next year we also are anticipating a 5% hike, so that would still be required.
So it would be a 1.6 this year, and then next year 7.5, and the following year 8% if we make the change in the base rate. I do want to caveat that we ran these numbers with the 900 1-inch meters in there that are residential.
Yep.
So if we remove those, that's about $300 and something thousand of revenue we'd have to make up somewhere with the rate increases.
Gotcha. So I just want to clarify, though, that it's my understanding that we would save the average residential customer who we say with a 5% hike, that'd be a $5 a month bill increase. So we're going to save them $3.40 a month this year and quadruple the base rates that some businesses are paying in order to fund that.
I think it's a pretty fair overview.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand the concern, but that seems kind of like putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and there's a huge impact to a select few small and medium-sized businesses. So, yeah, it's not something I think I'd be in favor of.
So counting noses, I don't know how many, I think there was 1, 2. We can tee up, I think there were more people, a small group that wanted, more that wanted to go back to the 2016 original AWWA multiplier that was weighed, that that would take off a little of the residential burden.
Okay, so that wasn't the numbers you just gave, the 7.5% and 8% numbers. I didn't see those in here. So overall, that would end up saving the residential user about 6% when you add all those numbers up. The 1.6 plus 7.5 plus the 8 versus the 995.
I think that's about 17%. I don't have the previous one in front of me, but I think that was around 24.
Okay.
The only other thing I need to caution or make you aware, one way or another, it came back to me that when we did this 2 years ago, schools are large meter users too. So that is a impact. They pay water bills just like anybody else. So they use a lot of water, exactly.
And again, just like I think member Reed said, they'll pass that on to the consumer, which in this case, the consumer is the resident. So they're going to pay for that too.
Well, the consumer is the residents in certain businesses, like retail business that serve only the community. But my business, I don't sell to local residents. Dover Energy, Mitsubishi, they don't sell to local residents. So it's not like just it's going to be passed on to the customer. They're going to pay for it immediately, only for certain businesses. But I do think,
and then with the school, you're paying it in school tax. So coming back to you
for the school, but not all of them.
For everybody that lives within Pearland ISD, yeah, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can argue the fungible nature of how money transfers from one business to the other, but the issue that we've wrestled with is how do we control rates? Now, not how do we control the economy, but how do we control the rate? And if we want to control the rate, this is a model which allows us to give a little bit more control on the rate. And I think we have four members that are willing to move forward with it. I think Member Owens has said that he wants to move forward with it. I want to move forward with it. Presumptively, I believe Member Hernandez and Member Reed have said they wanted to move forward with it. I think it gives us our four, at least to continue to explore.
Yeah, I would like to see it. So I guess that it would be about a 7% then overall decrease for residential if we were to explore this model a little bit more. But that's not factoring in the 356,000 or whatever it is you said from those 900 meters that we have that would, I guess, potentially be downsized. But I'd at least like to see this explored a little bit more, see if there is a more equitable way to do it. I mean, that's great if we can figure that out. If not, just to get a little bit more information. I think there were some things that have popped up from the discussion that weren't in the original response that I'd like to kind of see laid out side by side, give a little bit more thought to it.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying about four of you moving forward. You're in agreement to allocate the full increase to the businesses. Is that correct?
Yeah, shifting toward part of the model shown on page 7 of 43.
All right.
Are you one of the four? No. Okay.
All right, so Member Perez summarized things well. I appreciate that. We'll bring back the resolution, the ordinance. They'll follow that change back, and between now and then, we'll make sure everybody's as clear as possible about what that means and throw that out there. So, then, Mayor, items 10 through 12, they're all information items, again, on the water sewer, the transfer charges, details those, the various pieces that make up the water and sewer rate, the revenue that we have to generate for that, and then expanding the comparison cities. We've had that chart of the comparison cities every year since I've been here. People have made note of it. It really hasn't gotten that much of attention, frankly. We did dive in and we explained some more of the background that all water systems are not created equally. They have different sources and demands and age of the system, and we're just at the point that drives us to be at the higher end of that. We did, I think fair comparisons, the largest city next to us, Houston, show you in there. Then Baytown, another city that we mark up against sometimes. So that's in there as well. But I think more importantly is the reality of, where these different systems are and where they're getting the water. And then have to make note that, our reliability and having water is most important. And we haven't had the restrictions that some other people have had in the dry years. So that's a benefit to the system. That costs something to tee up all those different sources. I don't know if there's any questions on 10, 11, 12 further.
I've got a question, just general on general fund and enterprise fund. Going back through those days, looking at the dollars that's being expended, and what the budget is. I tapped into the conference and seminars in the different areas, and based on that, looking at that for this next year, on the general fund, conference and seminars is $871,473 for this next year. And the enterprise fund's $168,825. And then over $220,000 for general publications. Maybe just some clarification on that, meaning of coming in and seeing that many dollars spent on these conference and seminars. And I know that, some of them are, I'm sure they wouldn't be in there if they weren't well worth it. But in HR, I guess their budget this year on a conference seminar was $126,000 listed in there for the budget for this year. Coming up this year, finance was $46,000. Police training, which I know that includes other things, and it was $171,000, but that's just one area, and it doesn't include operations at $143,000 into that. And I don't know if it's just a case that all these numbers that we got coming in, but it's a lot of money. One thing, it's a lot of money, and I'm not too sure that maybe we shouldn't capture that in all one area to do that within, as we're doing it now, we do it within the departments and the divisions within the departments to do that and capture those in there. And so it just brought out a lot of concerns where we're looking at doing some cutback and things of that nature. And then when we're looking at, 300 million, or excuse me, that's a lot. I saw a number here, 370,000. But anyway, that's a lot of money in there, and I don't know if we have each one of those seminars or conferences identified. It relates to how many people is going to take off at one time to go do that. Does that impact us of being shortage of people during that period of time, or what? So,
yeah, we're happy to detail that. I mean, it's a question that comes up in many city budgets. We pointed out in one of the bullets in the intro on Saturday. Professional development, and it's not just conferences and seminars, it's professional development. The biggest chunk's going to be in public safety, which is the biggest chunk of our operations. We're at $80 million operation in just the general fund side. And so, that's one of the things, particularly when we aren't able to give as high a pay increases, that we are able to provide continuing professional development. I know people that are high performers here appreciate that. But we'd be happy, it didn't come up before, but we'd be happy we've got all that. We can share that at a follow-up and show you. But HR has some of the citywide training. It'd be impossible and not helpful, I think, to try to put all training, putting police and fire and public works and everybody in one line somewhere. But we've got it. I mean, that's part of the accounting system. So we can add that to a new follow-up if that's the desire.
Yeah, I think that would be good to be able to follow up. And, like I say, the publications and stuff that we're looking at or the dues, we pay out $195,000 a year just in dues to be in different areas. But I guess just looking at it from a holistic area that, there's a lot of difficulties coming up for us at the city and over a period of time. And I think it's incumbent on us sitting up here to look at the different areas of where we might be able to produce some kind of savings through there, no matter what they are on there, to be able to do that. And but I did have one other question through there. It was in the enterprise system, and we had $370,000 for credit card charges.
It's probably the item that we went through a couple years ago as well, and the question was whether we wanted to pass on to the transaction cost for the users, and we elected, I believe, as I recall, not to do that. So we absorbed that and we passed it, built it into the total revenue and the rates. So.
Okay, I didn't know if that was for open purchase orders rather than having open purchase orders that was buying something.
No, we make money on the credit card use. We get money back, so it has nothing to do with that.
Well, I think it's time for us to take a look at these different things in there and see if there's any way that we can cut back in some of them, or are we spending that much money, or are we just looking at it, anticipating to do that, and maybe in these areas, rather than breaking it up by department, then all the divisions up under it, it's just captured in one cost, and at the department level.
Well, we can't. There's different division managers responsible for the budgets, and that's how it's built. But we can put that together. That's the accounting system. It's not that big a deal. So, but it's I don't know.
Well, it's still got to be approved, but somebody does.
I understand. The council, the recommendation does include everything that everybody asked for from any standpoint. So we go through and you see the list, we shared everything that everybody asked for. And so we know we got to live within we're jumping over the general fund, what's available, sales tax. If we had higher property tax, wasn't a revenue cap, it'd be different, but we live within that. And that's why you have a balanced budget before you.
Yeah, well, that's why, looking at it, there's, it's incumbent on us sitting up here to look at areas within these different budgets, and that's why we get the books and goes through these to look at them and to see what the opportunities are, and if there are any opportunities to do some paring back on some of the costs that we see here based upon the costs that we're looking at for today's time, but also the costs that we actually spent in last year's budget and what causes the increase on that for this year. So. And one of the last things, and I'll be through after this one. In book number 2, I was just able to get through with it this weekend through there, and I wish each one of the areas that would come in, if we'd have put the number of staff that was in each one of these areas for the general funds and the enterprise fund, it would be good to be able to see it. And looking again, and I think I've mentioned on some of it, we're seeing that some of the increase of staff that are needed are only reflected in a 9-month, a 3-month, or a 6 months for this year. So that's a reoccurring cost that'll be a full load for this next budget in 21. So
there's a list of department staff on book 1 on page 1 of the summary. Every budget position in every department's in book 1, appendix page 3. The citywide pay plan has the pay ranges for all the positions in the appendix. In the general fund, total budget by department divisions is on page 9 there. Enterprise fund is on page 1. So it's all there.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it's book number 2 that you've given us here for the funding in each one, not book number 1. And instead of going through here and looking at each one, then going back over here and trying to decipher it.
However you want to do it. I mean, it's. I think most people have found that it's easier to have 2 books and one that's overview and the other is the details. So.
But if we could put the numbers here of the staff and of each one of the departments in this book too, then we can see what the costs are and the number of people that's in there. Not saying anything against it, but I just didn't like pulling up this book and then going back to this book and then going back over to this one.
We just I have a general question, or 2 general questions. One is the human resources expenditures. It says in human resources that we're only adding a management assistant, 12 months at 84,000.
So can we put that in the parking lot? Is there any questions on the rest of the water sewer and the COLA? We can jump, I'm happy to talk about that, so just wanted, okay. So in HR, we had one position recommended. We've shared that we've had a management analyst that's working with our high-performance organization work citywide. We can't do that unless we have somebody that's dedicated to that. And so that's the existing position that we had we've been trying, it's working great, and we like to make that full permanent after going forward.
That's actually a typo. There are two. There's an office assistant that we added in. I think it just didn't get put in book two. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, well, what I'm looking at is an increase from actual 2018 actual of about 780 grand to fiscal year 2020 proposed of 1.012 million. So roughly a million. So I guess a $200,000 increase. So I figured there's got to be more than just 80.
Sorry, if you mentioned the management system, and then that's the only department that doesn't have any dedicated admin support. So the professional staff there is having to do a lot of work that we feel that they'd be better spent to other things if they had that admin assistant. So
okay. So do we have the salary for the admin?
It's in this pay plan, I think.
Might have to get Rachel Winslow to look that up for us.
It's actually it's an executive assistant position, and it is shown on the highlights page in the added positions to the budget. The actual cost for that position,
what page is that?
Should be shown on the pay plan.
If you're looking at it, can you tell me what it is?
An executive assistant is grade 116, and the annual minimum is $38,495.
So I'm assuming the rest of that, like 220 difference is it's kind of insurance and just overhead costs.
Rule of thumb, 50% of the salary. So for each of those.
The other question was, we have the same insurance plan that we provide for all of our employees, or we give them access to the same insurance plan, right?
Yes, sir.
So what I'm seeing, and I don't know if you noticed this, but if you look at some of these budgets, like we'll see an increase in medical insurance of roughly like $10,000, and then go back down by like another 20 grand. For instance, and I'm just trying to understand like what's going on. Let me see here.
I think we got a pretty straightforward answer for that. So, John, you want to share that?
Okay, go ahead.
So the way that we budget that line item, because it's almost exclusively reliant on enrollment, is who's enrolled right now and what plan are they on, and then we put the inflation factor for the new rates that were approved in June. So every year people get covered by their spouses or have some other option that they're taking advantage of. So that change in enrollment really messes with that line, especially in smaller departments.
So it depends on the department then.
Exactly.
So in planning, the actual was 63 in 2018, and then 2020 proposed is 79. 2019 we budgeted 73, but then the actual was 62. So we're just budgeting high because a lot of the planning department uses more of a.
We'll see that we got 6 people enrolled on the 80-20 plan, and we'll budget for that the next year. That invariably changes, so that we catch it at projections, and it's kind of a thing to budget for, if that makes sense.
And if I could remember, Reed, to your main point, the city, we have to make that expenditure, but then we get back the employee contributions if they they elect into a higher program. Like if I chose the PPO, I'm going to be paying for that. So you'd see that on the other side, but the expense would be shown on the city side.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Council, have any other questions or comments they'd like to share with each other? And with staff, perhaps? Clay, does that pretty well wrap up your portion?
Yeah, the item one is the follow-ups. So we got the consensus on the water multiplier, so we'll build that and develop that further for you. There's a question about more detail in the professional development across the funds, and so we can provide that in addition to what was asked for the first time. And if there's any other requests, we'd like to do those now, because we blocked out a session 3. We've already got an agenda item that night, so we can, either deal with all those things at on the Tuesday, or we can add it to an agenda item on next Monday as well.
I had a couple questions in general. And it's probably easily explained, but on page 20 in book 2 on the police and materials and supplies, there's a charge of $22,000. What exactly are materials and supplies?
Going real nitty gritty. Page 22, book 2.
Page 20.
20.
Patrol.
Yeah, it's the patrol and operations.
So patrol and operations, materials and supplies can be anything from buying traffic cones to buying equipment for the patrol officers to use. It can also be to replace equipment in cars. It's generally miscellaneous material that we'll use for the officers to do their job on a daily basis that doesn't fall into uniforms or capital equipment.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Now, I had one other question on engineering. On page 52, for equipment repair and maintenance, it's $15,000, and in miscellaneous services, $158,000. What are those for?
The $15,000 is for fuel, and the $158,000 is made up of consulting services, printing, postage, mileage, conferences and seminars, membership and dues, cellular communications, and PC air cards.
And probably a majority of that is a consultant for inspections?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Remember, just to get to flow, so at page 52 is the summary, and then the very next one, 53, is the line item detail that ties out to that. So.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, or? Clay, do you have a pretty good list?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully we got most of it the first time through and got a couple other things. Frankly, we'll take a look, but we may just wait till that Tuesday to, rather than next Monday's regular meeting is going to be full up anyway, so we probably won't have a budget item on for next Monday. But we do need to deal with these other 2 items, Mayor, separately when you're ready. Agenda items 2 and 3.
Ready to go to number. We move on to item number 2.
If you are, sir, yeah.
Okay. Ask Councilmember Little if he'll present this for consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action resolution number R 2019-212. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
This is the item to set the formal public hearings. two of them this year. This for the budget, I'm sorry, and this will be for Tuesday, September 3rd, and emphasize Tuesday this is after Labor Day, and just to set and put on the record and advertise, we've got to get this done tonight so we can put it in the papers, old school, this week. But that's the hearing on the budget itself.
Okay, does the council have any question or comment on that? I don't have any questions. You got any more questions?
Nope. Vote would be appropriate if you're ready for that, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Councilmember Little, how do you vote?
Okay, we have motion second on the floor, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
Okay, with that information wrapped up, let's move to new business item number 3. Councilmember Hernandez, would you?
Yes, sir.
There for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action resolution number R2019-211. So moved.
Second.
So, Mayor, you've got to, we've got a requirement from the state that you have to exactly say what's in the pink there, so.
I move to propose a tax rate of 0.741212 cents, which is a tax increase of 3% above the effective tax rate to be adopted at a future meeting.
Okay, you have a motion and a second on that. Staff report.
So this is setting the two public hearings. They'll be at 6:15 on Tuesday, September 3rd, and then a second one on Monday, September 9th. And this is for the city's property tax rate. By this action tonight, you'll be establishing the maximum that we can go to, which is the rollback rate in this case this year.
Okay, council have any question or comment on staff report? I don't hear anything from council. Madam Secretary, I believe we may have a motion.
Councilmember Hernandez, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
No.
Councilmember Orlando?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Aye. Motion passed 6-1.
My agenda says, unless somebody has a take a wrap-up comment, my agenda says item 4 would let me adjourn this meeting, which I shall do at 7:50.